Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Google Sitemap Basics. My name is Evelyn Austin. I will be your moderator today. Today we have Amanda Chaney. She is an account manager here at Search Mojo, and her clients include Mazda USA, CS Cases, and Liberty Tax. So after the webinar, we will be sending out a copy of today's slides, so just sit back, listen to the webinar, and we'll have more information to you after the 10 minutes. You may also follow us on Twitter today with the hashtag SitemapMojo. You may post questions there. You can tweet about interesting things that you hear on the webinar. You can also follow us at Search-Mojo. You can follow Amanda at Amanda D. Chaney, and I am at Evelyn Austin. As we wait for a few more attendees to come in, I want to give you a little background information on Search Mojo. We are a search engine marketing firm founded in 2005, and we specialize in search engine optimization, pay-per-click advertising, and social media monitoring. We're located in Charlottesville, Virginia, the home of the University of Virginia, and also where the Dave Matthews Band got its start. We've been featured in many publications, and we've spoken at PubCon and Search Engine Strategies. Some of our clients include Meridian Systems, Mazda USA, Clorox, Taco Bell, and National Geographic. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Amanda.
All right, Evelyn, thank you. Today what we're going to talk about are Google Sitemap Basics, getting into what they are, why they're important, how to create and register them, and some of the different types. So to go ahead and start off, what exactly are Google Sitemaps? They're XML-based sitemap files, and the most basic explanation would be that it's a list of pages on your site that you can hand to Google as a guide. It gives Google a guide to the pages on your website. It tells them how often they're updated and gives the priority for each page on the site. There you go. Creating and registering Google Sitemaps, we like to consider it as an SEO best practice. Why are they important exactly? Well, they're essentially another way for the search engine bots, to find and index your site's content. And as I just mentioned, it tells Google the importance of each page's content and how often all of the content is updated. One thing I want to point out is that it is not absolutely necessary to register a Google Sitemap. They are not required to establish rankings in the search engines. However, they will help just get more of your pages indexed. So now moving on to some of the types of Google Sitemaps. The two types that I'm going to cover today are the general sitemap file and the sitemap index file. A general sitemap file is a list of all the web pages on the website pages and some information about each page on your site. As I said before, it's just kind of a list of each page that's found on the site. These sitemap files are limited to 50,000 entries or 10 megabytes. The second type that we're going to discuss is the sitemap index file. This is a special type of sitemap file, which you could also look at as kind of a table of contents for your site. These types of files are best for content-driven sites. An example of that would be something like Wikipedia or a Discovery Channel, something with a lot of information that gets updated frequently. This sitemap is limited to 50,000 entries as well, but keep in mind that's 50,000 individual sitemaps, not 50,000 page listings, or 10 megabytes. So what exactly does a Google Sitemap look like? So here's kind of a snippet of some code for a Google Sitemap with this is a general sitemap file with only one website page for the entry. The LOC tag you can see here denotes the field that contains the URL of the page's location. The last mod tag shows the date of the most recent page modification. Sorry. The change frequency tag tells Google how often the page is typically updated, and this is determined by the sitemap creator. And then lastly, there's the priority tag, which lets the sitemap creator tell Google how important this particular page is versus the rest of the content on the site. The priority can range from 0.1 to 1.0, 1.0 being the most important priority. Now, how exactly would you go about creating a Google Sitemap? First, I want to point out a good resource that you should keep in mind, which is sitemaps.org. This is a site that details all the different types and components of sitemaps and discusses all of the universal standards, because there are universal standards. So it's just something to keep in your back pocket to check when you're registering them. And below that, I've got some free tools listed that are great for quickly generating XML sitemaps that you can use to register with Google. Hand coding these sitemaps may be really burdensome for a lot of sites, because most sites are more than a couple of pages deep, so it would be really time consuming and burdensome for you. So I would suggest using these free tools listed here: GSite Crawler, Sitemap Builder, or XML Sitemaps Generator. Before we move on, there's one other thing I wanted to point out. On content management systems, if you use them, make sure you check to see if the CMS is creating an XML sitemap for you already. And you'd want to check with your CMS provider just to make sure. All right. Now, registering Google Sitemaps. This allows you to register and verify with Google Webmaster Tools. This is just letting Google know the exact location of the sitemap and that you indeed do have the authority to give Google this information about your site. So what you're going to do is log in with Google Webmaster Tools. And if you do not already have an account established, I would suggest that you go ahead and do that. It's free to do so. And then once you log in, you can click Add a Site and then enter the URL and continue. Next, what you do is verify your authorization to register the sitemap. And to do this, you would add the specific meta tag that Google would provide you to your homepage just into the code, or upload a blank HTML file to your web server with a specific file name, which would also be provided by Google. You would then return to your Google Webmaster Tools account and click Verify next to the site that you're uploading the sitemap for. And once the information is successfully added to the site, Google will now verify your site, and you'll have access to view information about the site, set crawl rate preferences, how often Google indexes your site, etc. One thing I want to touch on real quick is that you can also do the same thing with Bing, and you can use the same XML sitemap that you use to register with Google, and you do this through the Bing toolbox. All right, the next type of sitemap file would be sitemap index files. This is an ideal type to use if you have a content-driven site. It's less often used, but indeed may be necessary. This gives you the ability to add many individual Google Sitemap files. Most likely, you would have to create this manually instead of through a tool. You can create the individual sitemaps with the tools and then have to create the index file manually. Here you can see an example of some code pulled from a sitemap index file. The beginning and end sitemap tags are used to denote the beginning and end of each entry. There's another LOC tag to denote the location of the given Google Sitemap file. The last mod tag indicates that when the Google Sitemap file was last updated, and a lot of these will kind of seem similar to the general sitemap file, but they are, instead of individual pages, they're telling Google where and how often the individual sitemaps are updated. And to register sitemap index files, you would do this in the same exact way that you registered a general Google sitemap file. And to kind of take a step back and look at the general sitemap versus the sitemap index and what the differences are, the Google general sitemap file allows you to register 50,000 entries, which is 50,000 pages of your site. And a sitemap index file allows you to include 50,000 entries as well, with 50,000 entries per sitemap. So that gives you the possibility of having 2.5 billion entries. So if you have a large site, most people probably wouldn't need that much room, but it's there if you need it. And that's kind of the basics of Google Sitemap. Before we get into the questions, Avalyn may need to.
So I just want to thank you all so much for joining us for our quick 10-minute webinar. We will be hosting a Q&A for the next 2 minutes or so if you have a little extra time. If not, we will be sending out these slides like I mentioned at the beginning. For other questions, please contact Amanda Chaney at achaney@search-mojo.com. And you can always follow her on Twitter, Amanda D. Chaney. If you'd like to hear more about Search Mojo's offerings or SEO packages and PPC packages, please contact me, Evelyn Austin, at austin@search-mojo.com, or give me a call at 800-939-5938. I'm at extension 106. So we'll go ahead and jump straight into the Q&A. So Amanda, one question that we had was, do you have to submit a different sitemap for the different engines?
That's actually a good question. I did touch on this, but just to mention it again, it's definitely lucky that it's not the case. You can go back to that sitemaps.org to get details on the universal standards, but you can use one of those tools to generate one XML sitemap and use that same sitemap for different engines.
And exactly what are the benefits of registering a sitemap within the Webmaster Tools?
Google comes out and crawls your site on a regular basis, but this is kind of giving them an entire list of your site. So it's kind of essentially just an easier way for them to get to all of the pages. And as I mentioned before, it's not guaranteed that they will index every page of your site or that your rankings will be improved, but it's just an easy way to know when your site is updated and different priority levels for different pages on your site.
And can you touch on the specific limitations of each of these sitemaps again?
Sure. The general sitemap file, you can only have 50,000 entries, which is 50,000 website pages, which seems like a lot, but if you need more than that, if you have enough pages, it'll start bumping some off of the sitemap, so they may not be indexed. They may not come back around and get any updates if the site is updated or if that page is updated. So you might want to use the sitemap index, which we touched on, and that also has a limitation of 50,000.
Okay. And our final question today is, how often should I update my sitemap?
A lot of people probably don't update their sitemap as often as they should, but ideally you should be updating your sitemap anytime you have an update to your site content, so that when Google comes back to your site, it can pick up the changes. That's pretty much it. So yeah.
Well, thank you again for everybody who attended, and we will have slides out to you shortly. Stay tuned to our blog